Hey there. Today I'm going to do a re-recording of the week 4 lesson, which is how to make entourage on Photoshop. So for this lesson, we're going to make 3 different entourage. We're going to make a person, an object with hard lines and hopefully mostly orthogonal, and finally some sort of hairy or feathery animal. So we're going to use 3 different techniques that'll be applied to each of these entourage images. So the first thing we're going to do is control. Let's see, let me get my thing back on. We're going to do control and we're going to select. So control and then select our 3 images. And in addition to that, we'll select our week 4 hotkeys PNG. We're going to go in Bridge. We're going to go up to Tools, Photoshop, and load files in the Photoshop layer. So what this does is it opens up all of our images into one Photoshop file that is to the scale of the largest image in our Photoshop file. So as you can see in the properties window here, our canvas size is way too big. But before we adjust the size, we should just quick talk about destructive and non-destructive editing. So in Photoshop, there's 2 different forms of editing that you can do. Non-destructive is where you save the original source image and all edits are kind of reversible. And then destructive editing is where you permanently manipulate or adjust, edit your original source photo, and that source photo is no longer there. The best practice in Photoshop is to always maintain your non-destructive edits and keep your original photo. So I'll show you kind of the best practices for Photoshop editing and then kind of show you why we do that. So before we start, best practice for non-destructive editing is to convert our images into smart objects. And this is done because when we resize things in Photoshop, if we do not put our smart object on, it'll permanently resize our image. And so if we shrunk our image too small and then decided that we wanted it bigger, we would essentially be enlarging the small version of that image instead of adjusting it back to its normal size. And I guess a better analogy for that would be if we were like baking a cake. If we were not to adjust the smart object, we would be constantly baking. Every time we added an ingredient for our baking our cake, we would be kind of baking that ingredient into our cake instead of using the smart object, which is kind of like creating a recipe list for our cake, but not permanently baking it. So we're always able to go back and adjust things as needed. So we converted all these to smart objects. We can change the width of our canvas. Oops. Proceed for clipping. So you can see how small this is. We're changing it to 11 by 17. We'll plop our person in there. So now if we had we kind of reversed these steps and we wanted to enlarge this photo here to back to 80 inches, it would actually become, and we didn't do the smart object, it would become pixelated. But because we're using the smart object setting, that original source dimensions are saved and we can rescale as needed. To zoom in and out on Photoshop, it's very similar to Illustrator. You press Alt and you can scroll in and out. And we're going to rename, first we're going to actually save our document as you normally do through our other Adobe products. And then we're going to rename some of these. So first of all, our hotkeys, we want to find those. Our hotkey cheat sheet, which I believe is only missing the export button. We're going to lock that. I'm going to increase the size of my friend Vignesh here. If you scale things and you like the scale that it's at, you can just press enter and then kind of adjust the scale for you. I'm going to make Vignesh, I'm going to rename, so your person entourage, let's name that layer brush. So I can name that layer brush by double clicking on the layer that is my friend Vignesh here, and rename that brush. So I'm going to do that again. We're going to adjust the size by using the control points, press enter to sort of adjust that size. And then on this layer here, this is the car. We're going to double click on the name of that file. We're going to name the object lasso for the tool that we'll be using. Make that go away. There's our feathery or hairy animal. Press enter. And we're going to name this one select and mask. And we're going to make that one disappear by clicking this little eye icon next to the layer. Awesome. And then noticing that the weak for hotkeys is a little difficult to see. So we're going to go to layers here on this right side, hit new, or hit this plus sign, add a layer. We're going to add a shape in the background. You can see that our fill is white, and that's exactly what I would like. Toss that in there. Actually going to bring it down. Actually, bring hotkeys over that. And let's lock that layer. So now we can see our hotkeys. So first, we're going to start with our lasso tool. And in order to, oh yeah, and then just a couple other quick layer settings. If we want to duplicate things, we can press Control J. That'll duplicate our layer. So, and then our layer, you can see in this right side on the layers window will have the name of the layer, but with the word copy added to the back. And to lock that layer, let's see if we can press, oops, Control and in the dash. So I'm holding that down right now so you can see that highlighted. And you can delete that now. So the lasso tool we can open up by pressing L. And the lasso tool is a way to select objects. It comes in a few different forms. There's the general lasso tool, the polygon lasso tool, which is kind of the standard that you will use, and then the magnetic lasso tool. Folks don't usually use the magnetic lasso tool because it uses the computer. The computer has to decide what object you're trying to select and can sometimes misselect things. So it can cause issues if your image is a little messy and the computer cannot see the difference between the object you're selecting and the background. So because we pressed L, The polygon lasso tool is selected, and we can zoom in by pressing Alt and scrolling. With Photoshop, folks often like to or tend to try to, when they're first starting, zoom into the pixel level. We don't need to do that. Most of your graphics won't be seen at the pixel level, and it's not really a great use of your time because of that. Plus, Photoshop renderings are they're like a painting. They're more of a suggestion of an image instead of an exact replica. So you can kind of just start your clicking, only click once. If you double click, that sort of finishes the lasso selection. If you need to move throughout your canvas, press space, click and hold. And if you want if you're like get to a weird plus spot like I have here on my windshield, and you want to kind of go into the general lasso tool, which allows you to make more curved and organic lines, you can press L or Alt and click and drag around the shape that you're trying to get. So you can do that to get around curves. And if you stop pressing Alt, it goes back to the polygon lasso tool. So you can do that to kind of round corners. Then another trick with the lasso tool is if we press Shift, that makes our lasso go orthogonally 45 degrees or at 45-degree increments. So we're going to go down and around using our hotkeys to move and drag around the canvas. If you do something like this, so I just double clicked, I went off my image and I accidentally double clicked to complete the lasso. That kind of sucks because we haven't selected the tires yet. And I can actually go and adjust that let's double check. Yep, by pressing Shift. I guess for Macs, it can be Alt. And you'll see next to the lasso cursor that there is a plus sign. And so that's adding to our selection. And that you can just treat as the lasso tool we were using before. So when you double click, it finishes it. And if you have the opposite problem and you accidentally selected something you don't want, you can press Alt and there's a minus button next to your lasso tool, and that'll subtract from your selection. Awesome. So I'm going to add just a couple more of the details. I feel like this muffler is important. Sweet. I think that's good enough for now. So lasso tool can be kind of annoying because if you click off of something or you can kind of like add more or not add enough to your selection. You can complete your selection before you want to, but it's really great for like hard lines and quick objects, or selecting things that maybe the computer cannot see or the Photoshop program. Once you have your object selected, you're going to want to go up to the property or the layers window. You're gonna want to click on this, the layer mask. So what that kind of does is it kind of it creates a kind of a layer over our image and then cuts a hole in that layer, which allows us to see through it and see our image. So we can kind of play around with this mask, and if we right click on that mask, we can disable it and you'll see the original image is there. Go back in and enable it again, kind of turning it on and off. And you can kind of see the disadvantages of using the polygon tool, especially if you're not taking your time. Things can come out a little jaggedy, but once you plop this into another image, those little details can often be hidden pretty easily. So this is a non-destructive way of using the lasso tool. You can see in this mask here that the car silhouette is showing as white and the rest is black. And that'll be important to remember for our next exercise. So we're going to turn on our brush layer. And if we had a bunch of layers and we wanted to quickly just go to our brush layer, we can press Alt and then click on our actual layer, and it kind of zooms in and isolates our layer that we want to look at. This time, instead of selecting and then making the mask, we're going to make the mask first. So I'm going to click on this mask, and you'll notice that we have kind of the inverse color, which is totally okay, because masks work in white and black. And so this mask now is starting as white, and what we can do is press B, which is the brush tool. We'll draw in the black, which is kind of hiding the mask or the image that we're seeing now, which is adding to the mask. So if we drew right now, you'll see that no change is happening, and that's because our color is white. You can tell that it's white by looking down the bottom left corner. Here's like the swatches panel. We double click this little white square. We'll see that we are working in true white, so you want to make sure you're working in true white. And if we double click this black, we'll see we're working in true black. We want to make sure we're working in true black. And that should be pretty standard. So you shouldn't have to worry about changing it, but you should always double check. So before we start, and if we want to switch colors, so we're going to want to be drawing using our brush in black. We're going to press X, and X switches the colors that we're working with. As you can see in the bottom left corner, we're going back and forth. We want black. And you can see here we're adding in our mask, hiding the image. You want to make sure that you're working on your mask and not your image itself. I've definitely done that before. And you can see that as we continue to draw over our image, which is on our mask, that a little black dots are starting to get added to our mask, kind of showing that we're hiding some of this image. As you can see with my brush size, this would take quite a long time. We can adjust our brush size by clicking, by Alt and right clicking. We drag horizontally, we can adjust the diameter. And if we drag vertically, we can adjust the hardness, which is sort of how like hard the outline is of your brush. The softer is the more of a fade. So what we're going to do is we want to make this not that big. We want to make about this big, and we want the hardness to be 100%. Perfect. Oops. Press X and always press Control Z if you make a mistake, but we want to press Okay, you can see that accidentally changed my swatch to all white. We're gonna click on that square. I'm just gonna drag this all the way down and make sure it's 0, 0, 0. Perfect, sweet. So we're going to go in, we're going to just erase everything around our person. If you accidentally go over them, that's okay. We can adjust a little bit later. And then as we get closer, we can change the size of our brush. Before we do that, let's go to our lasso layer and hide that by pressing the I. We'll zoom into my friend here and make sure we're working on them. If we want to change the type of brush we're using, which we don't want to now, but we could if we were, say, trying to cut out like a bush and we needed irregular shapes on the edge, on the outlines or the edges. We can right click and we can open up the brush panel and adjust from there. But again, this is working pretty well for us. We don't have to adjust our brushes, but we should adjust the size. So I'm going to press Alt, right click and adjust the size down. And because we're not starting to actually get the outline of my friend Vignesh, we're going to change the hardness down a little bit just to help him fade in a little. And it's okay if you miss parts of him or your entourage. You can always go back and save it or fix it. However, there's little parts of your entourage that are really important to get because that will really kind of help with the illusion of getting them into scene or in situ. Certain renderings will require a certain level of detail. And so you can always start crude if you want and miss parts of your person. But then as you go in and edit things, you can see that you may see that like they need some touch-ups. And then, so the parts that are really important to get are the like edges. So in between the ears and shoulder, under the chin, and like these hands, that'll just really help with the illusion of getting them into the space. And so you can see I'm kind of breaking my rule of the pixels. I'm not getting all the way into the pixel, and I'm not like really getting worried about kind of subtracting too much. And if there's parts where I know that I took a little too much than I wanted, I can press X, which will change the color of brush to white, and that will allow me to add things. Oops. Perfect. This Vignesh is looking okay. I think I definitely could have had a little bit softer of a brush, but I think if we had Vignesh in more of a busy background, he would fit perfectly. He's a little dark though, so I'll show you how to non-destructively change that, and also that'll show you why we use smart edits or smart objects as well. So if we select our actual image, not the mask, and you can see here in the mask that where we drew in Vignesh, we select the image, go to image adjustments. There's all these different image adjustments we could make. I'm just going to do brightness contrast. I'm going to make Vignesh just a little bit brighter, remove some of that contrast. Perfect. Okay. You can see right here underneath our image now, we have the smart filters. And so this is kind of showing you like the recipe for the cake, and it's not baked yet. So we can actually turn it on and off. We can adjust the opacity of the filter. We could even go back and change how much contrast or brightness there is on our image. We could even go in and edit this mask as well, the way we edited our previous masks, to kind of paint paint more shadows in or highlights or whatever. And then just to kind of show you how these smart filters work, if I disable our layer mask showing Viknesh, and you can see that the smart filter gets applied to the entire image, not just what we saw prior, which was just Viknesh. So this is getting applied for the whole image, which is really great. And so if we needed to adjust any of these things, they're very malleable and easy to go back and fix, which is why we work in non-destructive editing. So we're going to hide Viknesh. We're going to go to our heron or whatever bird we're using. And we are, oh yeah, and I forgot one last trick with the brush. As we're using the brush, if we want to change the opacity of our brush, if we click any of the numbers, it'll change the opacity in factors of 10. So 1 is 10, 7 is 70, 0 is 100. And that can allow you to really get some nice kind of layering and blending in on your layers. Okay, so we select our heron, go back to our heron, our animal. If we press Control, Alt, R, maybe taking a second. Control, Alt, R is a select and mask setting. And so this is sort of the powerhouse of selecting images, especially the more difficult images. And I'll show you a few of the tips for this. I'm gonna adjust this here. So we're gonna press, so right now is like we're seeing our entire mask in red. And we can kind of change how we see that. Here in the view mode, there's different ways we can see things. Onion skin can be nice because you can see the original image. But I like the overlay. It really helps me see the contrast. We're going to click Select Subject up here on the top. So now Photoshop is trying to select our animal for us. This is a time when having a good source image helps a lot. Having a blurry background and a really in focus foreground is great, or having a background that's a very different color with a lot of contrast from our foreground. So you can see it already did a pretty good job. The feathers are a little messy, but otherwise we're doing pretty good. So here there are a few different tools that can help us. We have our standard brush tool, which is B. The object selection tool we've kind of already used. We selected our subject. We have our polygon lasso tool. The really great tools here are going to be the refine edge tool and the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool you can use to kind of add or subtract to your selection. And those are the same buttons as our lasso tool that we were using with pressing Shift and Alt. So if I zoom in here, you see this here. If I want to remove that, I can press Alt and just start to drag along in these darker corners. But you can see here that a lot of these the hair is starting to get removed, or the feathers. So that's one of the downsides of using the quick selection tool. But it might work really well for like this grass corner here. Maybe not. So if we want to kind of fix up these edges, we can go to the refine tool, and we can kind of just start going around the edge of our heron. You can see we're getting I'm gonna redo that. It's doing a great job at getting just those feathers. There's a few places that could use a little bit of work though. So our feathers are pretty well refined. I'm noticing part of the bird is missing down here. So we'll go back to our quick selection tool. We're just going to select parts of these. Oh, selected a little too much of the bird. Press Control Z. That's probably good enough. If it went and selected all that, we can always press Alt, try to add that back in. Oh, that did a great job. Alt, sorry, press Shift and get all the rest of this leg in. Awesome. Oops. Alt. Okay. And then I think one of the most powerful parts of this tool is, and I'm noticing the lasso tool might be nice for getting these big chunks out. Got a little too close to the leg there. Oop. I'm gonna press Alt and do it. That fills it in really nicely. So if we click Refine Hair here, Photoshop will try and adjust for all the hair or the feathers. So if you have someone like walking on a beach, this tool can be really helpful for getting their hair all in, and maybe we can see it work here. Let's try again. So it did a pretty good job. You can see in the bottom of this heron's chin here. Perfect. So we can double check on if we do on layer, we can kind of just see what the cutout would look like. I'm noticing that this isn't perfect. These feathers are like a little muddy, and so we can fix that by scrolling down and adjusting the settings of our mask. So radius is just like how big the turn radius is of your mask. Smoothing adjusts how smooth the details are of your work. Feather adjusts kind of the softness of the edge. So maybe a little bit of feather. Actually, I want more contrast because right now what we're getting is this muddy back around. So let's add a little bit of contrast. So I'll make our image nice and crisp. Hopefully, if I was going to place this heron, I have it in a marsh, so the legs don't matter nearly as much. And then I think the last really great tool here is the shift edge. The shift edge either shifts or adds a bit to your layer or takes away. To get a really crisp, I think we want to just take away a little bit of the edge, and then I'll move our image in or our edges inward, giving us more of a crisp look. And maybe adjust that contrast till we have something that we like. There we go. I think this looks much better. Okay, so when we have what we like, we can press OK. You can see here that it selected everything. We can press mask, and there we go. Now we can edit this mask in any of the ways we had before. So I can press B for brush and go in and like draw in things or draw out things by pressing X and changing the color. Do the L and press the lasso tool. And let's see. So sometimes when you're working with these masks, you can just do the fill with the lasso tool. So fill selection, we want to fill it depending. So like if we wanted to remove it, we'll fill in with black and vice versa if we wanted to add more. And if we wanted to go back to those settings that we had before, we can double click on our mask and it'll open up the settings that we were just working with. I believe we can do that with our other masks too. So turn on Vignesh. Oops. There's our friend Vignesh here. Double click on Vignesh. And you can see we have the same settings, so we could adjust as needed. So I think these tools are best to use kind of They all have their own strengths and weaknesses. And I think that using these all out in one as interchangeably. So let's see, if you have just you need a quick select something, the lasso tool is really great. However, it can be a little crude. And it's great for editing a select and mask, which can be used for really detailed images or cutouts. And the brush tool is great for those fine edits that have a lot more curves. But together, they're a really strong and very quick way of making Entourage. So a lot of designers will actually save their Entourage as Photoshop layers or like Photoshop files, just like this, because there's no compression or adjustment of the quality of your Entourage. And then you can always go back and edit how much of the Entourage you see, or if you need more, if you need some adjustments in color or whatnot, you have the original image. That's up to you all. But for the final, or for this assignment, just export each Entourage and give them their own page on InDesign. And I think that would be it for this week. Awesome. Thank you.